You're not going to get away with that because you're not at the top of the hierarchy. And that works, whether we're talking about things like across the board, like the state, and it works in regards to things like within your factories, within your corporations, within your schools. Because I think we all can identify with being on the bottom of the hierarchy. And you can look up and you can see as it goes up, people get more autonomy, they get healthier, they get happier in their home life to an extent. They just don't like coming to work because they don't like, it dehumanizes them. But it's better for people to have more autonomy within any institution. I find personally that many of the problems of our institutions and many of the problems of our society are directly related to the hierarchical organization and nature of our society and our institutions. I want to get into a little bit, now that I've talked about hierarchy a little bit, and I think we can all kind of understand how that works. I want to get into the class-based elements of anarchism. And one of the things, one of the big things that anarchism prides itself upon and pushes forth is worker self-management. The idea that people who produce wealth should determine how the wealth is produced, where the wealth goes, who gets the wealth, et cetera, how it winds up affecting all aspects of society. And it's true that within the confines of factories, corporations, companies, workplaces, et cetera, people who are more involved in running the place feel better about themselves and feel better about the job. Don't take my word for it. That's industrial psychology. In fact, almost whenever a corporation wants to streamline the way its workers feel, they'll engage in a bunch of things they call focus groups, where they ask workers to come, and they'll blatantly tell you the reason is because people, if people think that they have a say in what goes on in their workplace, they have a much better time coming here. Now, the key word there is think. Because obviously, if you're a corporation, you have no interest in actually allowing your workers to run the workplace, but you want to maintain those pretenses, and even they get that notion to the point where they realize they have to at least let people think they're running things, even if they're not. Worker self-management is predicated upon the idea of horizontalism versus hierarchy. Horizontalism essentially means that you would not organize things, on a pyramidic scale, but rather you would organize things across the board, horizontal. We all understand that. In Argentina, over the past few years, you found, I think it was up to 500 factories that were completely self-organized after the complete economic collapse in Argentina in 2001. Where factory owners just essentially left the country, sent their money elsewhere. Millions of people went from being middle-class citizens to impoverished overnight. They went to the bank, they didn't have any money because the country had defaulted on its IMF debt. And so what happened was you had a lot of people who had been going to work for months and not getting paid, and they're still going. They didn't know what to do. Well, they took the factories over for themselves. And what they did is they organized, and there's a book actually called Horizontalism. I suggest everyone, if you get a chance, peruse it. You don't have to read it and highlight it, meticulously like I did, but peruse it. Read the back cover. Take it 3 seconds. But what they did is they have assemblies that essentially run everything within their factories. And they vote on everything to the point where they've actually brought the assembly to places where people work. Like if they can't leave their station, they have brought the assemblies to those places so those people can still participate. This has been going on for several years. It's not the only example of horizontalism in the world. This is actually starting to occur in Serbia and the former Yugoslavian states at the moment. Andrei Grubacic has written, a leading anarchist of our times, has written extensively about that on ZMag, and especially in the Balkan ZMag, which you can't read Slavic, so I don't know how it helps you, but I've seen some translations. Interesting stuff, and that's a phenomenon that is definitely really catching fire within the so-called third world. Getting back to the particular tenets of anarchism, I want to just discuss anarchist organization in an anarchist society, because obviously the idea, I think you guys have kind of gotten the point, that the idea is to eventually dismantle the state, dismantle capitalism, dismantle hierarchical institutions, and then of course the question, people are sitting there and, well, what happens next? Because for the most part, people they don't have ideas of how to run things without those precepts and concepts. Well, one of the big things that we talk about in anarchism, one of the primary tenets would be voluntary association, which would mean that people would get together in groups voluntarily by region, by trade union, which would be called a syndicate, by community, perhaps by interest, perhaps there would be homosexual civic groups, different civic groups of different kinds, various groups, etc. To organize and get across what they need and what they're going to do to work with other groups in what are called confederations. Where a bunch of different groups, get together, have, meetings, et cetera, large-scale assemblies, and kind of determine what's going to happen. The syndicates, like if you were in the, metal syndicate, sheet metal syndicate, you would determine how sheet metal is produced. What's best for you? You're the worker. You produce this. How does it work best for you? Then you would utilize the other groups, consumer groups, civic groups, et cetera. You would talk to them. How does this work best for you? What do you need from us? Okay, and together, you would work into, like I said, at that assembly level, into the paradigms that would be utilized to make sure that everybody got the sheet metal, that whoever needed it, would get exactly that. Now, the difference between these assemblies and the current representative sham that's going on in Washington right now, and I was mentioned earlier, it's all a bunch of pro wrestling, is that we were going to elect delegates as opposed to representatives. Delegates different.